Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Assalamu alaikum viewers. I'm your host FAIZA with a prayer. May Allah keep you all safe, healthy and blessed. And may Allah fill this world with peace and justice, inshallah. Ameen. Today we will be discussing the environment of hate. There's a report on that which IHRC has created a report on that Muslim hate crimes from like 10 years before, and it's 10 years anniversary of that report now. And still we are seeing Gaza genocide as well, which is going on along with everything. So we will try to understand what is that report about and how it is connected to Gaza genocide and what it reflects, because since 7th October up till now there are like more than nearly 5,000 cases which has been reported related to Muslim hate crime. So we will discuss that in deeper sense, what is going on in Gaza at the moment and how 14,000 children are at brink of death. So how we can stop it and what are the reasons behind the situation, whatever is happening in Gaza. We do have a very prestigious guest with us, founder of IHRC, Sister Arzu Mirali. She is researcher and analyst. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Arzu. Can you hear me?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining us today, sister, and really honored to have you on the show. Sister, I would like your viewpoint on the current situation which is going on in Gaza, and then I would like you to introduce us with the report. What is that report about, and what kind of content it has, and how we can read this report in depth in a proper way, and what it has in this report.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, with regard to Gaza, what can I say? What can any of us say? We are all every day broken-hearted. You said yourself the stats from UNRWA, from UNHCR, from all the different agencies saying that there's an immediate risk of 14,000 babies starving to death in the next 98 hours, well, less than now, since they gave that announcement. How are we even in this situation where this can be spoken about and some people can think it's nothing or that it's just a news headline? Unfortunately, this is the environment that we are in, and that's how, I will explain in a minute, it will connect to the research that we had undertaken and we will continue to undertake. But the time for research in many ways is over. It's like what we're seeing now is so catastrophic. It is a fault line. It is an issue of acting upon moral norms whereby we have to have immediate relief and the immediate end, not just to the war, but to the system that has created that war, that has perpetuated that war, that has meant that children in 2025 can die of having no food. And not only is it a travesty and a tragedy because there should be no famine in a world where there is enough food, this is happening as a deliberate weapon of war, something beyond disgusting, beyond abhorrent, something that is very, very symptomatic of colonial powers. And we need to start understanding that we are still living in a colonial age under different names. And we have to start decolonizing, all of us, our minds, our systems, our education, and ultimately the world that we live in. I don't want to talk too much about the things that we already know because they're very, very sad in terms of what is happening in Gaza. I think it's important to remember that there have been successes as well in the fight back, but we are in a long battle, it seems. And whilst those of us watching it, we are obviously not on the front line, it's very important that we do everything that we can, whether it is screaming and shouting about these atrocities, whether it's about educating people who are well-meaning but don't understand, whether it's about protesting, whatever little way we can, especially boycotting and creating economic pressures, not just on the Israeli entity, but even on the US, and also calling for actually indictments of politicians, not just from the entity, but those in the international community that have been supporting and who are complicit in these crimes. There is a campaign right now to indict the British Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, and I think this is something we all need to start thinking very seriously about. Sister, you asked me about the report. Did you have any specific questions about how it links, or did you want to explore Gaza further?
If you can explain it, if you can explain it how the, if you can explain it how this, the findings of this report, I mean, how they are connected to this Gaza genocide. I mean, obviously there is a foundation of everything, the things like Gaza genocide, and we are about to see the same genocide might be happening very soon in Kashmir and in other places as well. And these kind of state of Muslim around the globe, we have seen this through wars. So many Muslims have been killed as well. And apart from these wars and these genocide and all that, we still face hatred. We still face all those laws which humiliate Muslims in different ways and disrespect them and make them feel less than anyone, or maybe with in comparison to other communities and all that. So if you can, it's up to you how you would like to introduce the report and whatever you feel is the most important aspects which we are supposed to understand in order to understand hate and how it is linked to such situation which we are in at the moment.
So I think there's a couple of things I should say. First of all, when we talk about these things, I think we have to give a long perspective. And when I mean long, I don't mean, okay, till 2009 or even 2001 and 9/11 or anything like this. I think we have to look back a good few hundred years at the world system and how it's been working, especially how Western colonialism, so the colonialism of Britain, Portugal, Spain, other European countries as well, even though they didn't have big empires, but they were very involved. Actually, the Dutch had a big empire. But even Sweden and Germany, they had different territories that they're going around the world and picking up. And then later, after the Second World War, the US, which already was also, colonizing itself, became, if you like, in the supposedly post-colonial world where we had like political decolonization, a lot of countries were getting independence. What you had instead was a new colonialism, a neo-colonialism, atop of which the leading power in that was the US. Okay, now that kind of makes sense in the the kind of international geopolitical sense when we're talking about Gaza or Palestine or any of these other issues. But those things that we think about as foreign policy or international relations issues, they also connect with domestic issues. And I think this is something that we often are trained not to think about from very young, especially if we grew up in the UK or we went through a very British education system. And if you're from India or Pakistan or anywhere where there was a British colony, we still have these kind of education systems that are based on the British model. So we tend to think that, okay, what happens domestically is different to what happens when they're working with other people or doing, international deals or policies or wars. What the environment of hate is about. Let me give you now the second thing, which is the background to the project, and then I will marry the two together. So IHRC, which I used to be the director of research, the head of research there, I'm not anymore, but I was very involved until 5 years ago. I was one of the founders. For a long time, it was working both on international issues and UK issues. And in the UK, we found over and over again that even when eventually we managed to get the government to accept that there is a problem of Islamophobia, of anti-Muslim hatred, of attacks, of discrimination going on in the domestic level, they did not want to really put any money or resources into looking at what the scale of the problem was, what the nature of the problem was, what the causes were, what the outcomes were. So we developed a methodology. It was overseen by Professor Said Raza Amali, who's a very eminent professor at the faculty, now at the Faculty of World Studies in Tehran. At the time, he was based in the UK somewhat, at the University of Birmingham and elsewhere. And this methodology looked at the several countries, and the United Kingdom was one of them, where we did the report twice, in 2010 and in 2015. And we surveyed in the second time something like 1,800 Muslims in Scotland, Wales, and England, and asked them questions like, you know, have you been attacked because you've been Muslim, physically attacked, verbally attacked? Have you been discriminated at work? Have you been discriminated at school? Have you seen Islamophobia on the television or in the media? Have you heard Islamophobic comments from politicians? And other such questions. And we were able to not only find the level of experience of Islamophobia that people had, but also the comparison between 5 years before and after. Now, first of all, the experience got very, very much worse, I should say, in the 5 years between 2010 and 2015. And 2015 is now 10 years ago, and we can only assume the trajectory was still going downwards. So how much worse the situation is now, goodness only knows. You gave a statistic of 5,000 attacks. Honestly, that is the tip of the iceberg. And if we have time, I'll explain to you why that methodology of the organization that gave that 5,000 figure is severely underreporting the problem. But the other thing that we did was that we analyzed, we went through a lot of media, a lot of political discourse, and many other different items. And later, in another project that was, funny enough, funded by the European Union at one point, analyzed where these narratives, these discourses of Islamophobia came from and what they were saying. And this is how it connects with Gaza. Because we said at the beginning of this that 14,000 babies at risk of dying in the next 2 days or less than 2 days. How is it that all the countries of the world or any civilized place isn't sending troops, isn't going to save those babies? It's a legitimate question, right? We wouldn't let 14,000 children starve in front of us on the streets here, or even in the streets in France. We would do something from here. Why is it that we are not, as a state, and as a series of states anywhere in the world, except with a few exceptions like Yemen and Iran, and so on, and taking any action? And the reason for this is because of how these discourses of hatred, this environment of hate works. So what we discovered and what we argue is that there's not one place where Islamophobia comes from. It's not one or two people sitting in a room saying, we're going to make a policy that's Islamophobic. Okay, it's been going on for a long time. Politicians start talking in an anti-Muslim way. They set laws that are anti-Muslim or impact Muslims in a negative way. The media reports that. The media also has commentators who are promoting that. Our education system, which is failing everybody in what it teaches, also picks up on that. And all of these, they mutually reinforce each other and they create this environment. So if you have this environment where Muslims are seen as less than everybody else, that they're not really even seen as properly human, that's when you get that situation where you can watch 14,000 babies risk, and inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will save them all. I don't want to keep saying it as if it's going to happen. Inshallah Allah will save them. Inshallah. We pray for that. But this is how people can just sit and just, read it as a headline and move on to the next headline. It's because they have been attuned to that. So this is the impact on people who are not Muslim, or who are, even well-meaning people who don't realize that that's how they're thinking. And then for the rest of us who are being attacked in this way, we also feel it. We sometimes ourselves don't feel that we are worthy, okay? Or we feel very frustrated and depressed because what can we do when there's such an overwhelming environment around us? So negative, so controlling. And so these are the issues that we are trying to highlight, and the connection is very clear, whether it's Gaza or Kashmir. We see exactly the same things happening in India over decades, long before the BJP were in power, where this kind of drip, drip, drip of anti-Muslim talks, speeches, comments, etc., have turned into a mass movement at the level of government and civil society, where all sorts of things can happen now. And, you know, there has been a high alert, a genocide watch on India for over a decade now. And the number one community that is at risk of genocide, and some people are arguing, are already being slowly genocided, are Muslims. They're not the only community, but they're the ones that everyone is very, very worried about. So I've talked a lot, if you want to jump in and ask me any questions, but this is how, you know, that bit of research in the UK is actually meaningful all around the place, okay? Because it's not just about us here. What demonizing us here is exactly the reason why everyone is crippled and not able to act on Gaza. And we need to break out of that. We need to understand what's happening, and we need to find solutions for it.
True. So, sister, what that report suggests, like what kind of factors did you find? For example, as you mentioned in your report, that it is based on the facts related to UK government, for instance, or within UK people, within UK, especially the Muslims. So, what factors have you seen which are the reason behind that kind of Islamophobic or Muslim hatred related stuff, and how do you see that it works, like and why do Muslim accept it, like as you mentioned as well in your key points in start, that we all are always apologetic, we always I mean, as a Muslim, no matter where we live, but we try to tell the world that we are very civilized and we are very cultured. For instance, we don't commit this, we don't do that. Example is the kind of behavior we will find in any Muslim around the globe, no matter where they come from. So if we just take the example of UK, for example, as you have researched over here, and your report is based on that. So if we take that example, so what factors would you like to share with us, which are reason behind that hatred, or that's how it is created, for instance?
So I think, sister, you're being a bit harsh. I think you're right. There are a lot of very apologetic people there, and they, you know, can really fawn at the feet of government and kind of, you know, always be trying to portray themselves as we are the good Muslims and the rest of these people are bad Muslims, and so on and so forth. And I think we have a lot of organizations that do that. But I think the majority of people don't feel like that. I think they don't know what to do, because we don't have, in the UK context, any kind of really effective leadership of the Muslim community. It's not even that we're disunited, we just don't have strong organizations. There are very few that can really take on the government narrative. Now, we're in a situation where, you know, there are a lot of projects going on. One of the things we did after this report, which I mentioned, the second project, we looked at counter narratives, okay? What is needed and what people are already doing to counter the problems of these narratives. So, for example, when I say narratives, you will find, for example, at the moment, there's a big thing about grooming gangs, okay? This is coming from certain MPs, certain ministers. It's a high narrative in the media. And it's now becoming a thing in civil society, because a lot of organizations are jumping up and down, including Muslim organizations, saying, no, we have a problem. Now, where there have been Muslims involved in grooming gangs, it's disgusting, and we all condemn it, right? But even the government's own statistics are showing that Muslims and people from ethnic minorities are actually underrepresented in the amount of grooming gangs in the United Kingdom. So it doesn't even reflect the demography as it is, okay? They are overwhelmingly from the majority community, if you want to call it the white community or whatever you want to call it, right? So you have here a big lie, but at the same time, it's being repeated over and over again. What can you do about it? And this is a real serious problem, because when you have newspapers that sell, for example, we're talking about newspapers or media where people tune in to watch, they don't have any incentive to give the right story, okay? Sometimes we're always appealing to them to do the right thing, but they don't have an interest in doing the right thing. They have an interest in getting viewers or getting readers, okay? So we are stuck. Now, there's an argument that we need alternative media, and we do have some. I mean, mashallah, we're on one of those platforms now, right? So we should have this, we should have more of it, we should have good quality, different media. But we're stuck because now we are talking to people like ourselves, and those media are talking to people who don't know better or who are themselves quite hateful. So we're in a polarized situation. So moving beyond that polarization is where everybody is stuck, I think. We keep trying to find solutions in the system. For example, now let's take politics, okay? We have, just to stick with the same example, ministers, MPs, using the same rhetoric, and people who are trying to become MPs and even councillors using the same rhetoric and getting votes, okay? They also now don't have an incentive to change because they want the votes, they want the popularity. This has become a popular narrative, okay? We've had an argument for a long time that if there are more Muslims, more practicing Muslims, and people who understand all these issues in the system, then the system will change. And I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of the problem of the political system is that you cannot really change it from the inside. You can reform it a bit here and there, and over these decades, for example, we have seen some changes here and there with race relations laws, with reports like the McPherson report about institutional racism, or the Mubarak inquiry report about institutional Islamophobia. But ultimately, they don't really change anything. So we now also have to understand that we need kind of system change, okay? We need a big culture change and a system change. And we need to start developing strategies towards that. There are no easy fixes here, sister, but I think the first part of it is that all of us who really care and are trying to do things, we have to understand this mentality, this changing of the mindset is very, very important, because only then can we start working on different projects or different movements or different politics once we understand what the problem is. And I think that's our first step.
Thank you, sister, for sharing. If you would like to share a little more in depth, there are any more points which you would like to share about the reasons behind the situation we are in. As you mentioned that we are in kind of polarized situation where, so how we can come out of that situation first of all, and who are the people who can do, like, I mean, in order to change the system, obviously we need to change the mindset, as you mentioned. So how and where these people can find who can change this mindset, and and we can come towards the change of system, and we could convey our message more effectively, for instance. So if you would like to add more points regarding earlier aspect, you can add that as well, and you can mention some solution as well, just in case.
So, sister, for example, we're having this conversation. People are going to watch it. People are going to watch the video afterwards. We are already in that process. How to accelerate that? The problem is the way the system is set up. It's all fragmented. We just have to find ways to accelerate this, and it's not easy, because we are faced with not just the problems of the state, but our own problems in how we react and respond with each other, okay? So it's going to be painful, but we have to keep trying, and I think that's the important thing. When we did the follow-up to this, the counter-narratives report, reviewed, I think, about 50-odd people, as well as, looking at the resources, etc. And we were interviewing people, for example, like the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Rowan Williams, as well as different journalists, as well as playwrights, as well as solicitors and barristers, as well as artists, and so on and so forth, okay? And we need to keep having these conversations. We have a lot of Muslim organizations, and what I would say to anyone who's involved in a Muslim organization, or any actually civil society organization or NGO who's watching or listening, as obviously I have no picture here, no video here, is to really, try and engage with these issues. There are a lot of reports around. I'm promoting one here which is 10 years old, and we are basically spending the year revisiting the things that we found in there. I mentioned the narrative of grooming gangs. That is part of a narrative about gender and sexuality, and how, you know, Muslims are always portrayed to be perverts and very oppressive towards women. Okay? And then that in itself is part of, joins with other narratives, for example, that we are violent, that we are terrorists. And all in all, we start becoming seen as a security threat, right? We're a security threat to, you know, because we might blow something up, or we're a threat to white girls, or and so on and so forth. Yeah? So everything starts kind of muddling its way into the same kind of overarching fear. And I think what's very, very important here to understand when I'm talking about system changes, I'm not saying we need to change the system or the system needs to be changed because it will be good for Muslims, okay? You know, as believers in Islam, we believe Islam is the best way and the right way of life, but what we want is justice, okay? That justice is for everybody. In an Islamic system, for example, it doesn't matter if you're a Muslim or not, okay? Justice is for everybody. So we're talking about a change of system here. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know how it's going to be exactly, but we know what it shouldn't be, which is this kind of racist, sexist, very materialistic, very violent, both domestically and internationally, kind of systems that we are living in. So we have to be clear that, you know, it's not just us as Muslims who are suffering under this system. It's even the people who actually, from the majority community, who even they might be themselves hating Muslims and being very racist to other people. They're also suffering in a way, okay? They're suffering because they're being misguided by a system where the media, where the politicians, where the education system, where the law is giving a false impression about Muslims. Now, there is a big argument by a lot of people, not just Muslims, on the left, and even, funny enough, on some parts of the right, who will say that this kind of racism, whether it's against Muslims or other groups, really it's just a distraction. It's a distraction from the problems that we have in society at large, okay? And it's very much used by politicians in particular to distract ordinary people and say, don't look at the problems, look at these people, they are the problems. And if you are suffering, it's somehow connected to them. That's why now when we have this sort of, in the last 10 years post-Brexit, this really, really high discourse about immigrants, okay, and migrants and too much immigration. Again, even that is being attached to Muslims, okay? People keep accusing you, Muslims, of, you know, somehow invading and taking over and changing the culture of the country. If you ask someone to explain how, no one can. Okay, no one can explain it. And us living as Muslims here, I think would say actually, probably we're the ones who are losing our culture, right? Or our different cultures. So we need to understand that those people who are being misguided are also being victimized by this system, and that they're not able to get, you know, good housing or good education or a good standard of life, not because of us, but because of the way the political class and the business class and so on and so forth are exploiting them. So I would really urge anyone listening that, you know, please try and find out more about these issues, whether you're going to go to our website, and which is ihrc.org.uk/Islamophobia, and find out about this kind of stuff, whether it's this project or other things, or you're going to connect with other research and other reports. It's very, very important to decolonize the way we are thinking, to stop thinking in this kind of pattern of the last few hundred years where, whether we realize it or not, there is a hierarchy of how people are considered to be human. Okay, and we need to start believing in the equality of all people and for justice for everybody.
That's very true, sister. So if we, for example, people who care about justice and who care about peace, for instance, and who care about truthful values, and the very important point you have mentioned is the people who are being misguided are also obviously victim of the system, the same system which in which they are living and they are believing. If we look at the current situation of Gaza, for instance, it has exposed so many things in that way as well. Like the way lies were showed on TV, for example, in the media houses and all that, and the kind of double standards they have shown, and the kind of money, for example, taxpayers' money. As I was watching yesterday some video of a student, she was saying that our money which we pay in universities and schools and colleges, it was in, I think so, in US, Washington University student, and she was saying that our money is being paid towards genocide, for instance. So how do you see that kind of awareness at the moment after these 2 whole years, nearly 2 whole years, which is happening in Gaza, and it has exposed somehow a little bit truth as well. So how would you like to connect to these double standards and the kind of people who are seeking justice, truth, and who are connecting to the reality at the moment because of that genocide? Because it's really in a way true that if Palestine is free, we all will be free. Even people who are living in peaceful environment, whether in America or in Western countries, but there are so many other rights which are being taken away from them, knowingly or unknowingly, which is systematic oppression that exists in any way, you can say. So how do you see that? If you could share some aspects on that. We do have like 10 to 11 minutes maximum, because we will have to have azan break afterwards, and show has to end to be going to be end. So in these 10 minutes, what are the most important aspects of this report? Anything you would like to share and you think is the most important, kindly do share with us as well.
So at the time the report was published, it was the time just as Jeremy Corbyn was elected the leader of the Labour Party, and there was a huge momentum of young people who wanted change, who joined the party, who elected him leader. Not just young people, but a lot of them were young people. And there was a sort of small moment of hope there, I think, where you could see people who had been energized, people who had otherwise been very cynical about the system. And I think there was a huge opportunity there to have a movement that could push for change, because there were hundreds of thousands of people involved in that. I think we lost that momentum when, after the 2017 election, the Labour Party nearly won it. It was a surprise for everyone. And I think they thought, well, okay, if we make some compromises with, different Zionist groups, next time we can win the election. And it was a huge mistake, because they made the same mistake again, which is thinking that you can change things from the inside. And actually they learned the lesson a very hard way and set back all that kind of political momentum. And this is why I'm not really very impressed with those MPs and that project last year during the elections, trying to get MPs in on a pro-Palestine vote, because you're just sending good people, or sometimes they were also not such good people, into Parliament to have a career rather than really effecting some change. Now, I said all of that was slightly negative. But what has happened in this last 18, 19 months, and it's horrible that it has happened in the middle of a genocide, but it has totally broken the facade of civilization and democracy and human rights that the US, Europe, and the Israeli entity had been projecting to ordinary people around the world. So now even people who were never very interested in or very connected with, or who were always confused about what was happening in West Asia, are now really able to see very clearly what has been happening, not just for the last 19 months, but for nearly 100 years, or maybe a little bit more than 100 years. So again, we have an opportunity now. We have an opportunity to engage with people. And I saw actually a few days ago there's been a lot of polling done across Europe and North America, and the majority of people, you're talking between 60 and 70% of people in all those countries have become pro-Palestinian, and only about 20% max in any of those countries still supports the Israeli entity. That's a huge change. It's a huge change, and I don't see that it's going to shift in any significant way anytime soon. So there is an opportunity here. You're asking me how, I wish I had easy solutions, but I think, again, if you're from an organization and you're watching and you're listening, maybe even get in touch. We can all kind of network and work together and work in, matching up artists with artists, journalists with journalists, media projects with civil rights organizations, and so on and so forth, so that we can all start connecting a bit more. Everyone is a bit worried about, just following the one leader, and I understand why, because we don't really have one leader in the domestic context to follow, right? But we do have leadership around the world. We do see, whether it's in the Muslim world or even from the non-Muslim world, or I don't even like the phrase non-Muslim because that doesn't mean anything. Let's say from Latin America or from East Asia or from any different part of Africa, okay? We have leaders who are trying to battle the system, okay? So we can have a mix of all of us in our different professions and our activism and civil society, trying to network and also to connect with those movements in other countries as well. And some of that's already happening. There's the Decolonial International Network that works connecting decolonial scholars and activists with, revolutionary governments and revolutionary movements. So there's a lot of things that can be taken into account, and their website is din.today, or like IHRC, ihrc.org.uk, or like the Universal Justice Network, which is a network of, I think, 70-odd NGOs from all the way from East Africa to North America, and they're always looking to network with more NGOs to try and get these messages and projects and different things working. Okay. We also need to de-escalate the hostility we have between ourselves, okay? Because sometimes we have good reasons to not like each other as organizations or groups. And I'm not saying we have to forget about all of that and just, hold hands and sing happy songs. But what we should do is realize that what are our problems between us, we can settle them quietly. We don't have to be used by colonial powers and end up fighting each other for their sake. We've had a very horrible lesson of how that works in Syria just this last year, and how this kind of pitching battles between Muslims has really, and actually even people who are not Muslim, has caused a big blow to the Palestinian liberation movement. Or we can see even in, certain countries, for example, Pakistan, how all these hatreds are whipped up, to stop the country from really functioning and becoming a really dynamic state, okay? Being a successful state. We've seen it in other countries as well. So, I've just given 2 examples here. We have to find a way of de-escalating that. In the past, I've been involved in such projects that work in a sort of level of, political conflict resolution in different countries and different contexts. And it does work, but it requires a lot of hard work. And, this is the route to go down. And it's the same thing. We have to start understanding that who's the big problem? The big problem is the way the US operates and its cronies and this neo-colonial world that we're living in. And in every little which way, we have to find a way to decolonize. First ourselves, and then the rest of the world.
So, sister, we are just left with 2-3 minutes. So what message you would like to convey, especially to the community who is watching, especially the people from UK or in the Western states? What are the most important steps we can take at the moment towards Gaza and towards the situation we are in as a Muslim around the globe?
let me just talk about raza, because it actually is connected, okay? We need to protest in whichever way we can, okay? Sometimes it's not a perfect way. Sometimes we have to go to demonstrations where we don't like the leadership of those demonstrations, okay? And I have a lot of issues with that are organizing some of the protests. Go to a small one, go to a big one. I know someone whose mom has been holding for 19 months her own protest outside the local council offices, okay? Whatever way we can do it, we have to keep doing it, because in the end of the day, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, you know, the victory and the result is in Allah's hand. We just have to try and do what is right for saving ourselves first, but we don't know. We don't know what the outcome will be, but inshallah it will be good here and hereafter, okay? That in itself is a way of decolonizing not just our own selves, but the environment we live in, because people see that, people understand in this moment especially that the system is not working, so we just have to try and do what we can. And when people see that, people connect with each other. I'll give you a small example. After everything happened, I put some flags up on our house. This was 19 months ago, and on my car. The amount of people that came and either hugged me or started talking to me, I never spoke to them in 20 years or 30 years of where I lived. They never spoke to me. Everybody was sharing, everybody was connecting. These were not Muslim people necessarily. They were from all different communities.
True.
This is the start. So please, whatever you can do that much for Palestine, and the rest will fall into place, inshallah, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help.
Thank you, Sister Arzu. I'm very, very grateful for your time. And it was lovely speaking to you tonight. And there's so much to discuss, but the time is just, we do have short of time at the moment. So I'll have to take a leave now. So thank you so much for joining us today. And to the viewers, I would say, as Sister said, mentioned that go to ihrc.org and read the report, watch the video, understand it, and do your job, whatever you can do to for Palestine, because if Palestine is free, you all will be free. It's very, very true, because all the double standards and everything that will fall into place once we are standing up for truth and justice, inshallah. So I'll take a leave now, and inshallah we'll see you next week. Allah Hafiz.